Hello and welcome to our flip video lesson, Life in Ancient Egypt, lesson 4.05. Our lesson 4.05 details are our Human Odyssey reading pages 109 to 115, Student Guide Workbook pages 102 to 104, our OMS assessment 4.05, and then the topic we're going to be discussing today is the social pyramid of ancient Egypt. Our lesson objectives, I went past one there, are explain how archaeologists and historians have learned about the daily lives of ancient Egyptians and list examples of everyday life in ancient Egypt. Lesson introduction, Life in ancient Egypt. Do you like to play board games? Do you enjoy boating or going on picnics? Do you like dressing up for special events? Many ancient Egyptians enjoyed these activities too. Ancient Egyptians enjoyed music and they kept pets. They wore clothing made of linen and they loved perfumes. How do we know so much about people who lived thousands of years ago? Because they covered the walls of their temples and tombs with scenes of their daily life. The social pyramid. Egyptian society had less gender-based inequality than Mesopotamian societies. In fact, women enjoyed many of the same rights as men, including the right to own property and the ability to enter many occupations. In some cases, a woman might serve as a high priestess in Egypt, a powerful and influential position within the temple. But there was also this hierarchy. So there was way at the top, the pharaoh, the most important, and was believed to be a god and possessed godlike powers. And then we had aristocrats and nobles, government officials and priests, including the pharaoh's most trusted advisor, the vizier. And then we had scribes, and scribes were people trained to read and write. They were valued members of societies. And then we had the artisans. They were people trained for a specific job, doctors, artists, metal workers, architects, merchants. The Egyptians, basically the Egyptians' middle class. And then the peasants were down at the bottom, the largest group of Egyptian people, farmers, homeless, peasants, and enslaved. And a lot of times there's another, you'll see on this next slide, there's another here where we have slaved or enslaved down here at the bottom. We're going to talk about that here in a minute. So the ancient Egyptian society. So again, if you look up here, this is basically the same format. You'll see a couple different depending on where you look, but they're all the basic. The pharaoh's way up at the top, peasants, slaves, or servants are down here at the bottom. Viziers and priests are up at the top with the pharaoh, and then we've got the scribes, the craftsmen, the artists, artisans right there in the middle. So the assistants first off is the pharaoh. The rulers of ancient Egypt were called pharaohs. They made the laws and controlled the land and its resources. Egyptians believed that pharaohs lived on as gods in the afterlife. And then we had the viziers, were these assistants to the pharaohs. They were the chief administrators of ancient Egypt. They oversaw the treasury and court systems, among other duties. And in some cases, the viziers knew more than the pharaohs because the pharaoh kind of trusted the vizier to kind of take care of business. And then the priests were powerful intellectual leaders. They preserved the culture of Egyptian civilization, cared for the temples, and officiated in the religious rituals and sacrifices to many gods. The scribes were extremely important. They were very educated. They formed a special class of literate professionals. They performed important bureaucratic duties such as record keeping, tax accounting, and the management of the public works. Then we have the artisans, the skilled. Ancient Egypt produced many skilled painters, sculptors, metalworkers, potters, woodworkers, and shipbuilders. Many craftspeople worked in shops close to the palace of the pharaoh. And then we had the peasants. Peasants were primarily responsible for growing crops. When they were not busy farming, peasants were often used to construct irrigation works, quarry stone, and to help build tombs and temples. And then down at the very bottom, we had the slaves and the servants. So most slaves in ancient Egypt were foreigners captured in war or traded to the Egyptians. Some slaves were forced to work in the fields or performed hard labor. Others worked as domestic servants. And remember, as we move through history, obviously things change. You know, we've talked about this before. And a lot of times you'll see in these readings or descriptions marked as slaves. Now we say enslaved people, people that were used in ways that we certainly would not want to happen today. So a lot of the slaved or enslaved people during ancient Egyptian times were those that were captured, ones that we would probably, in times of war, like we would call them prisoners of war, have them in some kind of war jail or something like that. the ancient Egyptians and many ancient cultures would use them as servants or people to do their work for them. So our student guide questions. Turn to page 102 in your student guide. There's not much space to write there, so again, you can grab a piece of paper if you'd like. So question number 1. List some examples of everyday life in ancient Egypt. And remember, this varied. If we go back to that hierarchy scale there, this varied depending on which social status you had. So many enjoyed outdoor activities such as picnics, sailing, water sports, hunting, waterfowl, and fishing. Children played with board games, dolls, tops, or leather balls. Pets included dogs such as greyhounds and tabby cats. Well-to-do families attended banquets. Men wore skirts or robes, while women often wore dresses. They did their hair up in plaits or curls, and the wealthier citizens even wore elaborate wigs. Both men and women outlined their eyes with paint, and they wore lots of jewelry made of gold, silver, copper, shells, and semi-precious stones. They also wore perfume. Musicians played harps and lutes. The Egyptians ate meals with their fingers. They ate such things as fancy cakes and antelope and gazelle meat, and they drank fine wine made from grapes. Question number 2. How did archaeologists and historians learn about daily life in ancient Egypt? They found scenes of daily life on the walls of temples and tombs. And remember, going back to archaeologists and historians, an archaeologist is the one who digs, who finds it. A historian is someone who typically works with the archaeologists, but they're the ones who study and really kind of make inferences from what the archaeologists find. Okay, turn to page 104 in your student guide, and you'll see a chart on there comparing Egyptians. So this is just a descriptor, a visual of the difference in daily life between a wealthy Egyptian versus an average Egyptian. So you can see their entertainment. The wealthier would do board games, hunting, water games, picnics, swimming, banquets. Average Egyptians would do hunting, water games, board games. Dress, they both wore linens. Obviously, the wealthy, they were a little bit more elaborate. The average was a little bit more normal or plain. Work, the wealthy were the architects, the priests, other professionals, scribes. The average Egyptians were the laborers, the stone carvers, the brick makers, the servants. Food, wine, fruits, meat for the wealthy. Average, beer, bread, vegetables, fish, a little bit more bland. Other interior walls were decorated much more elaborately for the wealthy Egyptians, whereas the average Egyptians, their homes were made of mud bricks. Okay, so you can take a few minutes if you need to pause this video, fill in your chart, or perhaps you were filling it in as I was speaking. So to just kind of make this lesson fully understandable and just get the additional information, you will want to read pages 109 to 115 in your Human Odyssey book. And then important words to study for your test, or important words to know. Carefree means free from anxiety or responsibility. So if you really think about the lifestyle, the social pyramid, who had more of a carefree lifestyle during ancient Egyptian times versus, not. Leisure time, time when one is not occupied or working, basically free time. Linen was that cloth woven from flax. And to import something is to bring goods or services into a country from abroad, introduce an idea from a different place. And then here we come to our quote section. Luxury is more deadly than any foe. Think about that. Thanks for joining me today. As always, stay positive, stay fighting, stay brave, stay ambitious, stay focused, and stay strong. Have a great day.